The name Capcom is one many today would associate with quality. With series such as Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, Street Fighter, and Monster Hunter, alongside many more, it appears that the sky is the limit. However, the success the company is experiencing today did not come without its failures. One of these games by the name of Chaos Legion, released back in 2003 for the PlayStation 2 and Windows, is what many would consider as such. It has been 20 years since the release of this game, and while many have forgotten it, I got the urge to revisit it. Its reception at the time, at least for the PlayStation 2, was mixed at best. Allgame gave the game a 2.5 out of 5 and stated that it starts out promising and gradually becomes more tedious the further you delve into it. While another gaming magazine called Edge stated, "Tests neither the reactions nor the brain enough to hold your interest." But the greatest review of all came from IGN, and it just simply says, okay. But the most important thing to remember is, that was then and this is now. I mean, surely the game cannot have been that bad, right? Well, the proof is in the game, and it is easier to show rather than tell. So I decided to go back and experience Chaos Legion once again by replaying the game. So join me as I set off in search of an answer to my one single question. Was Chaos Legion really that bad? Now, to properly answer that question, I will be assessing the gameplay, the story, the voice acting, and its replayability. Let's begin. The opening sequence starts with a vague mention of what a Chaos Legion is, followed by a bout of frustration expressed by Delacroix towards the protagonist named Sieg Warheit. It then cuts to a scene that happened a few hours before that event, where it is stated that Delacroix took the forbidden Apocrypha of Yzark. With the Order not happy about that, they decide to send none other than Sieg to track him down and retrieve the ancient tome. After the opening, we then slide into gameplay via the prologue. It is here we learn the basic mechanics of the game. By attacking with Sieg, he gathers souls underneath his HP bar in the upper left of the screen. These souls can then be used to summon legions as party members or cast special moves. This lets us get a taste of Thanatos, the best legion in the game. Once the boss of this stage has been beaten, we then obtain the Sword Legion, followed by an interesting cutscene where Delacroix shatters Thanatos into pieces with the use of a mask. What I like about this scene here is Delacroix's rhetorical question.
So, what's happened to the Legion's power?
Oh, well, nothing. He then showers Sieg in darkness while the game feeds us images of a woman named Sela, who Delacroix mentioned in the opening scene. It then concludes with Delacroix telling Sieg to join him to be liberated. 3 years later, it was stated that Daifan, the Twilight City, was massacred by one man and no survivors were left. The camera then pans to Sieg, implying that he is here to hunt down Delacroix and stop his next rampage. Once a stage has been completed in this game, we get treated to a scoreboard showing a breakdown of the experience that has been gained. This experience is used to increase the stat of a legion that was used during that stage. Keep in mind, only 2 legions can be equipped at any given time. The game also notifies us about the Sword Legion, so let's head over there and check it out. By clicking the Legion tab, we get into their menu showing how they can be leveled up, their statuses, and actions. For now, let's just view actions to see what the Sword Legion is capable of. Not much there as we just started, so the only other thing that is left to do is equip the newly obtained Sword Legion. With it equipped, it's off to stage 2. It is at this point for me that things get a little weird. While it is not uncommon for games to display information while it loads behind the scenes, the developers of Chaos Legion decided to have it voiced by a man with a strange pattern of speech.
A man's hatred transformed a town into ruins. A knight, a bearer of dark glyphs, sets out on a journey to fell a man whom he once called a friend.
Needless to say, it is not very impressive, but we did just begin the game. The focus of Stage 2 is to stroll through Daifan, the Twilight City, in search of Delacroix, and that is about it. The stage begins with a few enemies and more tutorials, which I will say that this game does get right. The first one that pops up is for the Sword Legion, while the second is for the newly acquired Defense Max Up. All stat upgrades for Sieg, minus ones obtained from a legion or 2, comes from drops within a stage, so to increase his health, soul meter, attack, or defense, you must pick up that respective item. This also happens to be for HP and soul potions as well. These upgrades happen automatically once picked up, so no need to menu to apply them. Keeping things moving through this stage lets the player get the hang of the game's basics without Thanatos around to obliterate everything. Overall, it's just some hacking and slashing with occasional Legion use, as right now the Sword Legion is pretty weak. On the way to the boss fight, we end up obtaining a Thanatos piece. Delacroix ended up splitting him into 9 pieces, so this is 1 out of 9, and mandatory to pick up to progress the plot. With the Thanatos piece in hand, it is now boss time. This big guy was tricky to hit at first, but after taking some licks, I ended up getting the hang of it. His most damaging move was the adds he spawns that explode, so getting away from them was the top priority. Once he has been destroyed, we then receive the Arrow Crest. But with some experience under our belt, let's finally check out how to power up a Legion. Each Legion has 5 stats that can be augmented. Force increases the legions on the field, Assist boosts one of their abilities, Enchant does the same thing. However, some legions can provide stat boosts, while others unlock useful abilities such as Double Jump. Attack and defense do not need an explanation, as that stat increase only affects the applicable legion. But let's continue to stage 3. We are still in Daifan, living our best life, swinging at all kinds of critters. So far, we have taken down these insect-looking guys called Balors and weird dogs called Ogma. But now the game introduces these metallic shooters called Barmo and speed demons known as Arcanus. And you guessed it, the newly obtained Malice Legion is strong against these types, however in its current form, it is terrible. Once these guys are cleared out, we can then progress to the next portion of the stage. In the middle of this area is this green pulsating creature known as a Genon. We must kill it. But how can we do so with all of these Barmos surrounding it? Well, we can attack it head on, right? You could, and believe me, I tried, but there is a much simpler method: Malice. By holding down the triangle button, we can aim our shots directly at that green turd and blow it up. It is one of those things where if you do it right, it is very easy, but if you do it wrong, it feels almost impossible. This moment right here, and many more to come, is how Chaos Legion operates. Do a specific strategy, and life moves on. Try to stray off the beaten path, and you might be here for a while. With that first Genon out the way and some more combat, we come across this next area with more of them clustered up, surrounded by a bunch of bozos. To the left of these monsters sits a Thanatos piece as well. Unfortunately, the sniping method is a bit weak here, so I also mixed in some good old sword swings, and eventually they all go down. The next screen transition then takes us to yet another boss battle, and this time he has brought the boys. So first we take the boys to the farm, and then we can focus on the main entree. Of course, that snipe technique is all we need, and it's a wrap. Our gift for our service is none other than the bomb crest and a cutscene. It appears that Sieg is not alone in this bizarre place, as we come across Arcia, a maiden of the silver. She was ordered to scout out and pursue Delacroix, but honestly, Sieg could not care less. He simply tells her,
"You shouldn't concern yourself with that."
And that concludes stage 3. Stage 4 starts with a summary of the past events, but instead of me telling you that, I will let you hear it for yourself.
She provides information to assist them in reaching the ruins of Murdoa in search of Delacroix. They know all too well that they will not pass through this land without battles to fight.
With that out of the way, our first goal is to destroy the target shown before us. With the newly acquired Blasphemy Legion, the game also gives us some prompts explaining the intricate details of it. Now this Legion right here, man, it's so good. But after taking out the adds, we can focus on the target. With it defeated comes the next part. We get to kill 4 Genon that are scattered across this very same area. Then we get to kill yet another floating green guy. I cannot make this up, people, but once he falls, we do obtain another piece of Thanatos. Only 6 more pieces to go. This is then followed up by the boss we just had a run-in with on stage 3. But this time it's multiple copies of the same boss, so technically it's different, right? And with that, stage 4 comes to a close. Why does this stage even exist? Well, the real question is, why not? Stage 5 is next on the list after a few Legion upgrades, and man, am I feeling pumped about this game. Our first mission in this stage is to destroy the target. With that target easily destroyed with the help of the Blasphemy Legion, the next segment has us do the exact same thing. Here you will see me kick the crap out of the Blasphemy Legion because its damage output is amazing. Just to be upfront with you, this is a Legion that will be heavily used for the rest of the game due to that very skill. It is quick, effective, and costs very little. The next portion of the stage consists of taking out some Genon yet again, so I'll spare you the details. And with those guys down, we are then tasked with taking out the Egan, which is another annoying bunch of monsters who shoot out beams non-stop. With this area cleaned up, we are then led into the next boss fight. I know, seems like this ride will never end, right? Don't worry, just hang in there, people. Now this boss fight against Mapinos was quite challenging to say the least, as each phase introduces something new. To damage Mapinos, we must hit his green shell to explode his tender bits, but after a short duration, he will slam that shell down right in our face. Thankfully, this is all that he does until we hit the green bar, where he then decides to switch it up on us. Now, not only do we have to dodge his shell slams, but we also have to deal with some beams that come from the newly spawned Egan. Luckily, they have a pattern though, so after some trial and error, we get a good flow going. His last health bar is much of the same thing, however, he also has this annoying whip attack that if hit, pretty much kills you. Eventually, Mapinos falls though, and by eventually, I mean it took me about 45 minutes to down him for the first time after learning how he works. Honestly, this has been the most enjoyable experience I have had in this game thus far, as it wasn't just destroying this target or destroying that target. It forced me to use my brain cells, and it is crazy that it took 5 stages to get to that point. Now, I'm also aware that at this point, you may have some questions built up about the combat, about the legions, about my thoughts in general. But for now, we will keep chugging along. I am doing this, of course, to prove a fundamental flaw in this game, so please, bear with me, we are almost there. Once Mapinos has been slain, we then obtain the Claw Crest for yet another legion, and get treated to another cutscene. C gets attacked by Delacroix, but Arstia comes in to save the day. We are then finally given an explanation of the 3 sacred glyphs, which somehow allow the 3 worlds to reunite once again, and that's the gist of it for now, as it's time to destroy the target, fight once again. With a few more upgrades thrown into the legions, it is now time for stage 6. This stage starts with a couple of waves of enemies, followed by killing the target at the end. The next instance has more of the doggos running around, combined with some metallic enemies that get blasted with the Blasphemy Legion. Seriously, thank goodness this thing exists. After that comes yet another wave of enemies, and kill the target. This is also a great segue to talk about the enemies in general. As you can see, there's not much variety. While I could say that that is an issue, it was not uncommon for games back then to only have a handful of enemies outside of bosses. A good example of this is Devil May Cry, which came out 2 years before this game. The problem with Chaos Legion is that the enemies you do see are so heavily spammed, it feels like there are only 3 of them when there are quite a bit more. It is odd to say the least. With those guys taken care of, we end up running to yet another gate where a boss meter appears, but unlike last time, it is not as cookie cutter, as there are Egan that sit on top of the ruins of this area that will light you up as you try to damage the guys on the ground. So first things first, say goodnight to those Egan, and now it's back to business. I found the best method for dealing with these guys was spamming Blasphemy from the top of a ledge. Luckily, the doggos serve as soul batteries, so when they would hop on the ledge, they could get slain, so I could then continue spamming those blessed bomb kicks. Stage 6 concludes with the obtainment of the Power Crest. Legions for days. Oh, and a cutscene. Arcia wakes up from a nightmare where Delacroix has killed her brother. I guess this is her reason for being adamant in the hunt for him. This is then followed by C giving us some spectacular commentary about the Apocrypha of Yizar.
So, you're saying that we should head towards Kuzga the Grand Cave?
I guess that's the only way.
Why does he want to unbind the spirit?
You don't need to know that. It's between me and him.
On and upward to stage 7, and also, minor spoiler alert here, we are halfway through this game. Anyway, this place at least has a change of scenery and some new enemies. But with the new comes the old, and by old, I mean those dang Genons. We make our way up the ramp that's past the slain Genon, and at the end of this path is another bad to kill. Now, the rest of this is pretty standard. Follow the only path that the game gives you and fend off hordes of the same enemy. Eventually we come across this area that seals us in, and we face some more of the invisible guys from the prior stage. A few battles ensue after that, and at the very end of the stage is yet another boss fight. But this time it is against this weird cocoon looking monster named Volvor. Now, to be frank with you, Volvor has like 3 moves on a good day. He operates the same as Mapinos, in which he introduces a new move the lower his health bars become. At the start of this fight, he is quite difficult to damage, but as his armor drops, he becomes more vulnerable. The most annoying thing here happens to be the ads, but that's exactly why they are here. Eventually, with enough damage to his body, 3 yellow orbs will appear that shoot lasers out after a given time. They also happen to be his weak point, so it is very easy to get some damage in. With the good old jump and slash, Volvor 2 gets defeated and rewards us with another Thanatos piece. At this point, we should be around 6 pieces total for Thanatos, as each stage contains 1 up until this point, not counting the prologue. Stage 8 takes place in Kuzka, and the game narrates that fact to remind you, just in case you have forgotten. We start with your favorite trash mobs in this weird cave, as they call it, and at the end of this first path, we encounter the bigger version of the Balors, just invisible. Eventually, white versions of the Balors appear to be cut down as well. The next segment just consists of jumping and shooting to take down yet another green floating guy, which is then followed by more kill the target, but this time the target is bad for the 20th time in a row. After they go down, we end up in a circular area where White Balor appears, and then 2 Rudogaria show up for some fun as well. You know the deal, spam blasphemy, and eventually they will all drop. The area after this is simply more fighting with the invisible Balor, and once they are defeated, 2 paths open up before us. By going right through the blue door, we end up taking a spiral path up through the level, killing none other than a Genon along the way while also fending off some of the Ogma. The left path through the red door is the same, just 10 times worse, as not only do we have to kill the Genon, but we also must deal with the bad that spawn and the White Balor. With them taken out, however, we finally get access to the boss's room. Now this boss right here, who goes by the name of Gil Balor, I know, shocking, it's just awful. While his moveset is limited, the issue with this boss is being able to hit him. You must damage his 2 front legs enough to make them collapse, which then brings him to the ground. But if you then attempt to melee him, well, you're in for a bad time. So the tactic here is to instead use the good old Malice Legion, and we can snipe from afar. Nothing to this strategy either, just be sure to dodge his lasers, aim for his legs, and then his center. And with him down, we obtain a spiritual gem. It is an item that is used to extend the limits of your legion. This means a higher tier of moves and stat increases, which will come in handy. More important, however, is a cutscene that follows. Sieg gets some nasty flashbacks of what he did to Sela. It was Sieg that killed her, and because of her death, Delacroix lost his mind. After reaching the Apocrypha of Yzark, he sought to obtain the 3 glyphs to unite the 3 worlds and somehow be with Sela once again, or at least that is what the game tells us. By the way, do you know what the 3 worlds are? Because at this point even I have no clue, and I'm the one playing the game. But moving on, the flashback concludes with Delacroix saying to Sieg that he wants him to suffer every day for the rest of his life. The camera then pans back to Arcia and Sieg in a cabin. Turns out these flashbacks have worn him out so much he can't even move from the shock. Arcia talks about how she wants to avenge her brother by going after Delacroix, and Sieg states that he couldn't save a single woman. Arcia then tells him to rest, and off into the woods she runs. That scene had quite a lot to unpack, didn't it? Why did Sieg kill Sela? Where's Delacroix? What are the 3 worlds? Is any of this for real or not? Well, to answer those questions, let's continue with the stages, shall we? Only 5 left after all, and I'm sure it's building up to be a real banger. Now comes the moment we have all been waiting for. It is none other than Stage 9. Let us start this off with our favorite pointless narration.
The girl leaves the injured man behind to seek revenge.
I'm sure you have also noticed by now, but this stage is played with Arcia, not Sieg. Arcia also comes with an entirely different moveset, as she doesn't need legions to do her dirty work. If you have happened to play any Devil May Cry game, I will say that her control scheme and look are quite similar, so I will not focus too much on that aspect. But we are back doing the same thing. Kill this mob right here with her, kill that mob over there, go fight this target, etc. The bread and butter of Chaos Legion, as you have learned. Along the way, you are also able to obtain upgrades just like Sieg and the occasional bullet case, which extends her ammunition for her special move. Eventually, this stage comes to a close and we end up fighting Mapinos once again. However, due to Arcia's range, this time it is a cakewalk. But that is not the point of Stage 9. The real point of Stage 9 is the map selector that drops after defeating Mapinos. This single item is why Chaos Legion as a game is fundamentally flawed at its core. This map selector gives the player the ability to replay past stages. Let that sink in for a moment. This item allows the player to replay past stages. This means you have to go through 64% of the game before you can truly begin the Chaos Legion experience. So if you happen to pick the wrong legions because you like them, then you may be in for a bad time. But that is not the only issue here, as that is assuming you stuck with 1 or 2 legions up until this point. The other issue, which is catastrophic in my opinion, is the legions. The game continuously rewards the player with these legions stage after stage. So what would your average player do? They would equip that new legion to test them out in the next stage in hopes of it being useful. But the problem with that is that the new legion is level 0, meaning its stats and abilities do absolutely nothing to the mobs and bosses you then have to face. So you end up making it to say stage 7 or even 8 with a ragtag bunch of legions who have been barely upgraded due to you as a player wanting to experiment. You then end up getting stuck on a stage because your legions are too weak, or you found out you invested in the wrong ones. At that point, anyone with 2 brain cells would say, yeah, I'm done with this game. But trust me, it gets worse. There is no currency in this game, meaning there is also no shop. No shop equals no way to purchase consumables. So the HP and soul potions a player obtains during the first 8 stages are all you get. Sometimes you get good RNG and happen to stockpile a lot of them. Other times you may blow through all of them as you learn and barely beat the boss of that specific stage. Then you end up starting the next stage with only 1 HP potion to your name, and at the end of a 25-minute long adventure, you get stuck on yet another boss. Sure, the game provides you with 1 HP and soul potion during boss fights, but that is not sufficient. As you can see, there are many glaring issues with this game from a progression standpoint, and that alone is enough to turn a lot of people away. But since we have come this far, why not go all the way? From stage 10 and onward, I will say that this game begins to open up and become fun. This is quite unfortunate as the candle begins to burn when it is already too late. With access to the prior stages, we can go back and farm HP potions, gather missing Thanatos pieces, pray for stat drops, and most importantly, level up the legions. It is a night and day difference to say the least. It unfortunately took me this long to realize that some legions, such as the Flawed or Hatred, have some game-changing abilities once they have been leveled up. Flawed, for example, adds snappy movement into Sieg's combos, which is effective for temporarily paralyzing the enemy. Additionally, it also provides Sieg with the ability to double jump. Yes, double jump. Suddenly, the world of Chaos Legion was at my fingertips. So naturally, I began leveling up other legions while also keeping an eye on Blasphemy, and by the time I began stage 10, the whole game just hit differently, but in kind of a good way. I realized the game had potential, but due to its poor choices, its highs could not balance out the lows. Stage 10 starts with the classic Annihilate Your Enemy mission and also introduces monster leaders. If you take out the leader, the other monsters in that group will lose morale. It is an interesting way to try and change up the basic gameplay loop, but it feels a little too late. Anyway, after clearing out a couple of different waves of monsters, the next screen brings us to yet another boss fight against Volvor. But this time, the developers decided to add in those annoying ass metal guys, so all I can say is thanks. Either way, Volvor goes down quite quickly at this point, as not only do we know how to defeat him, but the current set of legions are decently leveled. Our reward for defeating that boss is yet another spiritual gem, and after some more upgrades, it's time for stage 11. Stage 11 starts with a fight between those annoying ass metal guys and another kill the target, so this is already my least favorite stage. If you take the stage to the right, you can pick up a free attack up, and the path to the left is necessary for progression. Now this area is not bad, as it's a decent spot for some experience, but can be cleared quickly if you choose to ignore all the mobs. It then consists of more linear paths, followed by waves upon waves of monsters. At the very end of the stage, we are also treated to kill this Genon for the 40th time. I know, it is surprising, isn't it? After they go down, it is boss time, but first we have a cutscene to watch.
I've waited a long time for this. I now possess all of the 3 sacred glyphs. So Sieg, what you need is stop it. Do you want to try with your sword?
It is time to square off against Delacroix himself, and I tell you what, I was not ready for this. I say that because it took nearly 25 minutes to make it this far, and I just wanted the stage to end, but it is what it is. Overall, this face-off against Delacroix is just weird. He naturally wants to run away from Sieg, but if you then decide to ignore him, he will switch roles and pursue him instead. While he does have the largest pool of moves that we have seen from the bosses so far in this game, it just still boils down to running or jumping out of the way. It is also crazy to me how effective the old press jump and swing move is on him. I mean, who needs legions when that basic aerial swing just wreaks havoc? Eventually, he goes down though, making us the victor. But in regular storytelling fashion, our hero lets his guard down, allowing Delacroix to spill the tea, as the kids would say. He finally defines what the three worlds are and explains the power known as the Chaos Legion. This is an ability that calls upon monsters as the sacrifice of wandering souls. Moving on though, Delacroix despises that and then hammers on about Sela before telling Sieg his next destination. Man, I have got to say, this plot is as captivating as rain hitting a window. It just feels void of any personality, let alone ambition or drive. Sieg may have indeed killed Sela, but the game does not give you a reason to care. Sure, Delacroix is going to go off to do something sinister, but this talk of three glyphs, three worlds, purification, and regret towards Sieg feels superficial at best. But let's head on to stage 12 now, as this game is almost over, I promise. Stage 12 is stage 2, but with a different set of enemies. It even has the same boss from stage 2, he just looks a little bit different. Stage 13 gives us a nice change in scenery, as it takes place in a cathedral chock full of those annoying ass metal guys. Also, by this point, our boy Thanatos should be back in possession, however weaker than his Prologue version due to the absurd amount of experience needed to level him back to max. We start again with the groundbreaking kill this Genon and then move on to the next screen, which consists of annihilating the enemy. At this point, I start running through every mob that pops up and I just kill the one necessary to trigger the next screen. This then brings us to a mini boss fight at the very end of the staircase involving the beefy armor boys and invisible Egans and fire-breathing doggos. With them taken care of, the last gate opens up, giving us access to the final stage. Stage 14 immediately begins with a cutscene where Delacroix states that to revive Sela, he must kill Sieg. But Arcia randomly interjects herself into this conflict by telling Delacroix what an idiot he is and then proceeds to put one of her guns against her head. She then pulls the trigger, and as blood pours out, Sieg runs after Delacroix. Now the real battle begins against Delacroix. Remember how we fought him 2 stages ago? This first phase is the same. There's nothing new here. Once he falls, we are then treated to another cutscene. It turns out Arcia lived, and she explains how it was Delacroix that forced her to pull the trigger. During that explanation, Delacroix recovers and goes in for the kill. However, Arcia's generic open arm pose triggers a flashback of Sela that disrupts that action. This somehow breaks Delacroix's psychosis, and it is revealed that it was him all along who killed Sela and not Sieg.
Open your eyes, Delacroix!
With him now aware of his actions though, he feels there is no turning back and sacrifices his soul to be reunited with Sela. This slides us directly into phase 2 of this boss fight, in which Delacroix has manifested himself into this wing monstrosity that looks kind of cool. The battle, however, is like Volvor, in which ads spawn on the battlefield, while Delacroix does his very limited number of moves. Nothing fancy here is needed to take him out, other than timing the good old jump and swing maneuver, eventually bringing him down once again. But with that, he is still not done, as that monstrosity transforms into another monster resembling Sela for the final battle. This battle begins with some ads that must be dealt with while dodging Sela's range moves. Once they are slain, she then comes down, allowing us to damage her. After a set amount of time, she would then bust out some nasty lasers that, if caught in, mean you die. This tactic is rinsed and repeated a few times as you whittle away at her health. Each time this is done, a different batch of monsters appear to keep things fresh. Once the beefy armor boys come out though, that means we're nearing the end, as she also introduces a new move that rains down beams on the battlefield if you somehow get caught in it. But she too eventually falls. Overall, this final fight was lackluster to say the least. The first phase of this fight was a boss we already fought before, so it was like knowing all the answers to a test you have already passed. The second phase of this fight was a skin of Volvor with one extra move. The third phase would have been more interesting if the game had focused on giving Sela an actual move set and not just using ads as filler for a drawn out fight. With that manifestation of Seele taken care of, we then see a scene where the real Seele tells Sieg she was happy to have met him in Delacroix, who appears right beside her. The game then cuts to a graveyard of swords, and well, I will let the game take it from here. And I mean that question seriously. I was honestly cracking up at the credits rolled because this whole experience just did not seem real. But with that, let me answer the most important question of all. Was Chaos Legion really that bad? Yes, Chaos Legion was an abomination. With hindsight being 2020, this game from the start had no chance of ever taking off. There was nothing of interest in its story, its characters, and most importantly its gameplay. This is not to say that there are not good aspects about the game, which is mainly the idea of legions, but the bad just far outweighs that. Combat is painfully basic, with Sieg's moveset being non-existent without steep investment into the legions, which remember, the player does not have access to fully build until they have played more than half the game. While I'm not opposed to stat upgrades being in the stages themselves, many of them are RNG reliant, just like the potions, which creates another problem. There's no shop in this game to buy consumables or upgrades. It is all within the stages. With this game coming out after Devil May Cry and Devil May Cry 2, it makes you wonder if this was the beta for the first game, as it is worse in every way. It felt like playing Devil May Cry, but it was stripped of any creativity. Imagine playing it with no shop, no collectibles, and the weapons you do get cannot be upgraded in the slightest until about stage 12. That is exactly what Chaos Legion did, but without any charm in its story, so why would anyone want to play it? While the voice acting wasn't awful, the real problem stemmed from the game's inability to create immersion. Sieg, much like the rest of the game, is void of any personality. Let us not forget about the whole Seele story angle either. It is quite difficult to build a story around not one but 3 characters who are all one-dimensional. With all of those negatives combined, would I ever replay this game in the future? Probably not. And if I did, I would just load up my save file and run through a stage or 2, as this game without the map selector is just bad. While a remake for this game could do it justice, I found Astral Chain to fill in the itch that this one could not even scratch. So feel free to check that game out if you haven't already. But I have said enough here. Chaos Legion, please take it away.
Once the truth was revealed, I knew it would end up this way.